City Council meeting to order for June 21st, 2022, first day of summer. Ryan, please take the roll.
Councilor Pastori.
Here.
Councilor Marcus.
Here.
Councilor Carter.
Here.
Councilor Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Claridge.
Here. 4, Citizens Forum. Looks pretty sparse. 5, council additions to the agenda. I have one thing, and it is we're going to make that I'm going to make that before the audit presentation. It's only going to take one thing because that's going to generate some questions from me so that I can clarify that so that I thought Randy might be here so the rec board always understands how that works about transferring funds, accepting donations, and where it goes from there. I think I want to ask you a couple of questions about that. So I'm going to put that as, double A. I don't see any problem with that. I mean, that's a good thing to do, but we've got to get that clarified for everybody. Rec board. And then Ryan, you gave us this just goes with our claims, right?
Yep. And I have
the number's still the same. There's no change on the numbers.
Nope. I have a total when we get to that.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended? Motion by Brandon.
I'll support.
Support by Stuart. Further comment or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Number 6, the consent agenda. The minutes of the regular city council meeting of June 7th, 2022. Claims. Payroll number 12 is $15,330.89. Payroll June 17th, 2022 is $2,350. Ryan, what is the accounts payable?
The accounts payable is $99,995.47 plus an additional $9,382.32 for a grand total of $127,058.68.
That's for just accounts payable?
Yep. No, well, plus the payrolls, everything total.
Okay. Read that number again, please.
$127,058.68.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
So moved.
Moved by Carol. Is there support? Support by John. Any further comment, questions, or discussions about that? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Now we'll move on to double A under business. And that is just the rec department is requesting an additional $200 to offer free hot dogs at the park after the parade. Ryan, just want to give us a little introduction before I ask for a motion.
Yeah, this was just a last minute request that I received today. They do have some money from donations that will cover this cost.
And they'll just donate that to us and then that'll cover it.
Correct.
That sounds great. So is there a motion to approve the rec board's $200?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Stuart. Is there support? Support by Brandon. Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Well, the moment we've all been waiting for. Welcome, as usual. What do we have, page 68 already?
We got 69 already.
Mayor, members of the council, my name is Bonnie and I'm one of the partners with Sterling Company, and our firm performed the financial audit for the city of Buhl for the year ended 2021. And so I'm here to just do some highlights. You did get the information ahead of time in I think both an electronic form and with the booklet. And as you can see, it seems like every year the packet gets thicker and thicker. So we won't go through every single page. I want to highlight about a half a dozen or a dozen items for you to consider. And by all means, if anybody has questions as we're flipping through it, just pop in. I do want to just bring you to the table of contents though, because these books do get quite large. And I just want to, it's a good opportunity to run through everything that is in the audit report. Obviously, there's the independent auditor's report. There's a management discussion and analysis section starting on page 4. That is written by the finance department based on information that comes out in the audit. It's generally in narrative form. That part is unaudited. There's the basic financial statements, and those of you that have been through this presentation before know that the financial statements have 2 different reporting models within this financial report. There's a government-wide perspective, that is that bird's eye view. It's on the full accrual. It takes in all the debt for the city. It records all the assets on the full accrual method. And then we have the fund-based statements, which are the individual funds that you as a council and the city deal more and more on a day-to-day basis. So there's those under the basic financial statements. There's footnotes, lots of great reading in the footnotes. There's required supplemental information, or what we call RSI. We'll just briefly touch on, that's the OPEB, the other post-employment benefits that we usually visit with on every year, as well as your net pension liability. There's supplemental information, which is all the detail, and we're going to spend a little time tonight in that back section on the individual funds. And then if you turn the next page, the very last section, is the last 2 years for both 2020 and 2021. The city of Buhl received in excess of $750,000 in federal aids and grants, which required what we call a uniform guidance audit or a single audit. So that section is on the end. So we're going to just flip to the independent auditor's report on the next one, and I'm pleased to present that the city of Buhl received an unmodified, or what we call a clean audit opinion, which means that in our opinion, these financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So that's what the next 3 pages will give you detail on that. Then we're going to go quite quickly through this, but by all means, if you have any questions on pages in between that I'm not going to touch on tonight, let me know. But if you flip to page 16, now 16 through 19 are what we call the government-wide basis. That's the reporting model that shows all the assets of the city of Buhl based on historical cost. It'll record debt, and it does that in generally in 2 big buckets. You'll see a column called governmental activities and one called business type activities. The business type activities are those that are your water, your sewer, garbage, electric, those enterprise funds, which we'll talk about in more detail, and those are to be generally funded by user fees. So that's one bucket. The other column, the governmental activities, are all the other activities that the city of Buhl provides that are generally funded through property taxes, LGA, or other federal and state funding sources. Page 17 will show, if you look towards the very bottom under the net position, generally the net position is one of the financial benchmarks that a city can show that'll show the financial health of a city. Again, these are on the full accrual basis. Under the governmental activities column, under the total net position, you'll see that the city of Buhl had a little over $4.5 million, almost $4.6 million in total net position for the governmental activities. Approximately half of that is invested in your net investment in capital assets, your infrastructure. There's $53,166 sitting in restricted funds. In 2021, the city of Buhl received some American Rescue funds that came from the federal government. Those are set aside. They have until 2024 to be spent. And then unrestricted of 1.9, almost $2 million in the government. The business type activities, you'll see overall $7.5 million, with the large portion of that being invested in again, the water sewer lines. We're going to talk a little bit more on that. So overall, again, under the governmental activities column, that does bring in, if you go almost in the center of the page, it does bring in the estimated net pension liability of a little over $179,000. That's your proportionate share of the city of Buhl for your participation in para, and then the other post-employment benefits of $664,069, which was determined by your actuaries for your OPEB liability. So again, the government-wide statements, we're going to spend a little bit more on the detail to fund that. Government-wide is that very high-level bird's-eye perspective of bringing in all the assets and liabilities for the city. But you can see after all that's done, both in the governmental activities and in the business-type activities, the city of Buhl ended up with a positive net position. Now if we flip to page 20. We're just going to talk a minute about your general fund. The general fund is the fund that the city operates most of your general activities out of. And the one, again, a benchmark, and we talk about this every year when we look at that. If you look under page 20, under the fund balances for the general fund, you'll see that the city had, as of December 31st of 2021, $1,562,471 in your total fund balance. Now, of that fund balance, again, we're going to carve out $53,000 that's restricted, that's set aside to be reported using the ARA funds. There's $30,000 that has been committed. Some of that is for employee. There's an employee savings account that's about $18,000 that's set aside if you have employee turnover and training. So there's a total of $30,000 in committed, and then you'll see unassigned of $1,478,898. That was left in your general fund at the end of December 31st, 2021 to go into it. The City of Buhl has a minimum fund balance of 5 months of your operating costs that you want to, that's your minimum balance to carry over, and right now you're sitting about 20, which is pretty consistent to what you've had the last couple of years. So a lot of times this is a big book, there's lots of information in it, but that's one of the takeaways that we talked about, that you remain relatively stable in your general fund despite the huge infrastructure projects that you were doing. So you still have about 20 months in your unassigned balance. Still talking about the general fund, let's flip to page 22. That shows the activity of what happened in the general fund. Third line from the bottom shows that generally for the end of 2021 you ended up with your revenues exceeding your expenditures of $142,000. So based on, you know, $1.3 million expenditure budget, fairly consistent. Part of the increase came from the final sale of lots that you had at Stubler and some of the other properties. So there was $7,500 in sale of capital assets, which included the lot sales. There was also issuance of debt. If you remember right, in 2021 you purchased a pumper truck and the John Deere grader, and part of that was you had made payments for part of it, and part of it you'll see you did some financing for that. So that's the $184,396 in financing for those pieces of equipment. The ambulance fund too, once we talk, you'll see when we look at the enterprise funds, the ambulance fund has been inactive, and there was an approved transfer by the council of $200,000 that came out of that fund to help fund the public safety equipment that was purchased. So that is included in the transfer in of $328,000. So overall, again, the second takeaway from your general fund is that you ended 2021 pretty much even keel at a positive $142,000. The rest of the funds we're going to touch on further back. So now I'm going to flip you page 25, excuse me. The other fund we'll talk about is the big one, is the infrastructure project. I don't think it's been any secret that you've had a citywide project going on. And what the city did was created the second column in infrastructure project back in 2019 and predominantly in 2020. As the project was getting going, the city had created this fund to accumulate. If you look at under the capital assets line, kind of in the center of that column, so as of December 31st of 2021, the city had little over 7.2 million accumulated in your citywide projects for your water and sewer, and some of the other infrastructure projects. Now, of that 7.2 million, there's multiple funding sources. Right. Multiple funding sources. So you can see right below that, 7.2, under bond payable interim financing, the city had borrowed 2.5 million, almost 2.6 million against you. You had a $3.7 million available USDA loan, so there was some interim financing that helped pay for that. You also, you'll see on the next page, there was about 2.1, another couple million in other grants that came through from both federal and state sources. So there were multiple funding sources on these projects. And so it was convenient that the city had kept everything in that one infrastructure account, and I worked with both Diana and Ryan through the audit process to double check where all these funds were coming from. But one of the things, if you look at, again, back on page 25, under that infrastructure project column, that second column, there's a line kind of in the center of the page that says due to other funds of $1,630,000. So as of December 31st of 2021, the city had internally funded part of that project to the tune of $1.6 million. As you were waiting for the state bonding bill, that's 1.5, that should cover that. I haven't talked to them as of today if that's come in yet.
Yeah, we're working through that. And just for the council's reference, the state kind of dropped the ball on being able to get us our funding right away, so we're working through that process. There's no issues, it's just some documentation that was sent to a former employee of the state that got lost, so it needs to be all resubmitted. But
So fortunately, through this process, when you look at it, you were able to internally fund temporarily that project financing at the end of the year. And a lot of this is timing issues. The project should be completed now in 2022, and the final dollars, you'll see above in that same column, there was over $1 million outstanding at the end of the year. $1,024,000, and that was for grant funds that the city had expended, and you just turned around and had request reimbursement for those. Those came in shortly after the first of the year. So a lot of the issues sitting in this fund are simply timing. Those should be wrapped up, and then once this fund is closed, the project is done in 2022, the city will, the finance will work with your engineers to determine the split between the water, the sewer portion, they're keeping track of all of that, and also the street portion, because there's a portion that came in under phase 2 for Woodbridge and Whiteside, I think, that has a street portion of it, and that too will be carved out. And then each of the respective funds will get that so we can calculate depreciation. So that was a big one. So just to realize that 1.6 million due to other funds is just simply a temporary financing option. The other thing on page 26, still talking about the enterprise funds, I just want to bring under that operating income and loss line, you'll look at your water, sewer, refuse, and electric fund. We talk every year. These funds are supposed to be based on user fees, and they should cover all your costs, including depreciation. So you can see the city did in all those cases, with the exception of the electric fund. The cost from Minnesota Power, your electric purchases were up over the prior year, so you did end up with an operating loss of $25,000. That's not typical with that, but you can see your other funds. Refuse, you came out at $117, so I don't think that's pretty even. And then you'll see that even in the water and sewer, you were able to cover your depreciation, which is something that cities strive for. And so that tells that the city is continually monitoring their rates and making sure that they're appropriate to cover not only the current operating costs, but that estimated depreciation. So when projects are coming through and you need to have repairs or replacements to them, the city is planning accordingly for that. Any questions on the enterprise fund?
can I just add one thing about the electric fund, just for the council and the public's note, that this, the loss in the electric fund, we're still under the old contract with Minnesota Power, so with that new contract, these numbers will look significantly different next year. So that's why we didn't recommend an increase or a dramatic increase in the electric rates for the residents, because it will be changing based on the new contract.
Was part of that due to that undercharge?
No.
Okay.
And then I just want to flip way back to page 57, because I just still want to talk briefly on a couple of the funds that we're doing. So we covered the general fund, we covered the enterprise fund, which those are based on user fees. Page 57 will highlight your debt service funds. Prior to the new issues for the infrastructure project, the city had two outstanding debt service funds. One was the TIF bond of 1997. That TIF district was decertified, and the remaining funds for that were sent back to the county. So that fund is now closed out, and Wanless had the final payment, and so both of those debt service funds you'll see at the end of the year are zero. Now, starting in 2022, you'll have a new debt service fund that will be with your Woodbridge and your Whiteside. There was a $1.1 million bond issue that was done in 2021. Part of that was streets, part of it was water and sewer. So you'll see that portion that was related to the streets for about $880,000. That's part of the infrastructure that's going on and being completed. That debt service fund will be created now in 2022. So those debt service funds are, the other two are now closed out. And then if you flip to page 60, those are your capital projects funds. The city has made great strides in the last 3 to 4 years in monitoring these capital projects funds. If you remember it, some of the audit recommendations were not to keep these funds open once the project is done. They should be closed and transferred accordingly. The administration, that capital, that first column, there is a management letter. It's a recommendation. I've talked to the council in the past. The capital projects funds really should be tracked for capital projects. And what the city of Buhl traditionally has used your administration fund or your 401 fund, you'll hear it referred to, is an accumulation of funds set aside for capital projects. So you'll take your, oftentimes it's your, you'll have some taxes go in there. You've got your, some of your state aids that you'll specifically set aside down there. But then what the council does is make approved transfers out of that fund to help fund different projects. The nature of this administration fund really doesn't lend itself to a capital projects, and so the recommendation would be to collapse that. You could still track it internally and have all the controls, but it would be moved into your general fund and set aside as a committed fund. Is what would be the correct way to do it. You wouldn't lose any of the integrity. You'd still have all the control as a council because it would be a committed fund. So in other words, anytime it needed to be spent, the council would have to do a formal motion to utilize it or to uncommit it. But it would get your financial recording back into line with what's recommended for governmental accounting standards. So once you hit the management letter, that's what we've been talking about. Otherwise, you'll look at Monroe, East Monroe Alley and the Damien Addition were all closed out and transferred. Those projects were done. Sharon Street is one now to consider looking forward, the status in 2022. The final collection on the special assessment occurred in 2021. There's about $683 left in that fund as far as delinquent special assessments go. So it wouldn't be recommended to keep that open for a number of years. It would be to look at formally closing that and putting the funds accordingly. Typically, you've done it back into 401 and tracked them. But Sharon had the final collection in 2021. You flip to page 62. France Street was actually done in 2019, so that would be another one that we recommend the city look at. There's only $444 left in that fund, and based on the audit testing, there's about $346 of delinquent special assessments. So that fund we'd also recommend looking at the city potentially closing. South Memorial is the next one, we're on page 61. South Memorial is still has special assessments going until 2024, so that capital project will remain open for a while. And then you'll see Whiteside and Woodbridge, that's one of the new ones in 2021. You'll see under special assessments, some taxpayers paid their assessments off early, so there was a total collection of $25,959 in 2021. And then under other financing sources, you'll see that that's where the portion of the bonding that you did for the 1.1 million, that was part for Woodbridge and part for the 315,000 went over to the utility funds. So that fund came into it and then was transferred over to the infrastructure, because that's where the accounting for that Woodbridge, the alt additions that were put on as far as phase 2 of your infrastructure projects went. And then the final capital project was Damien 3. I think there's a few names that are out there, but in the financial records it was Damien 3 is the housing project that was created, and that was, you received 160,000 in and 160,000 out, so there wasn't a net cost to the city on that one. Any questions on the fund? Otherwise, I'm just going to bring you back to page 37 real quick to talk about your long-term debt and the footnotes. Note 5. Again, this is all new 2021 debt based on your infrastructure that you had. You'll see the first line of that 1,195,000 GO bond that was issued out, that was split. 880 was the portion that was Woodbridge and Whiteside. 315 was the infrastructure portion on that. And then you'll see the next two, the equipment financing that was done for the grader and the pumper truck. So this was all new debt in 2021. And then on the very bottom of that page, it does talk about your temporary borrowing that you've done for the 2.5 million also for the infrastructure. So it gives in the middle of the page the debt service cost for the next few years split out. So sometimes that's an interesting footnote if you're looking at that particular thing of where the city of Buhl is as far as their financing goes. Otherwise, there's just a few last minute things. Page 47, we talk about OPEB, your net, that's your other post-employment benefits are the actuarially determined commitment that you have to your staff for continuing health insurance costs after they retire. The actuaries have determined, it's right in the center of the, kind of towards the top, and of $664,069. So that is not required to be funded. It's required to look at that as an established liability. The city does have an internal service set aside where there's a portion of that you've done. There's about $156,000 sitting in your internal service fund that helps to fund it, but it's not required. The next page talks about your net pension liability, which is your para proportion. And again, that gives eventually it'll give it 10-year history. And then the very last comment I want to make is page 62 starts your capital or your federal funds, your uniform guidance audit for 2021. You received $2,680,518, or you had expended, I should say, in federal funds. Primarily, it came from your water and sewer line replacement through Minnesota Rural Water. So that tripped, because we're over $750,000, tripped what we call a uniform guidance audit. So we're required to test additional things, disclose our findings. And our findings are on page 69. And I'm pleased to say that the City of Buhl just really received 2 findings. They're standard findings that I think since I've been doing the audit, you've heard the same too. You've got the lack of segregation of duties, which is very common in a city this size. In other words, that means you've got 1 or 2 people that are doing the financial accounting, so it just requires oversight from the council, questions to be asked. And then the second finding that we're required to disclose is that we assist with the preparation of the financial statements. That's required under standards to put in as a finding. Otherwise, the rest of them, their Minnesota legal compliance was clean, and no other findings that were cited. So there's a lot in there. I just tried to, like I said, highlight a couple things. You had a couple other pieces of correspondence, which would have been a management letter and a standard governance letter. In the management letter, we've already really talked about the recommendation. The management letter is just things that come out of the audit for things for the city to look at. One of the things we discussed is considering collapsing that administration, that 401 fund, into a committed part of your general fund balance. There's also a reminder in the management letter that part of the agreements going forward are water and sewer reserve requirements that will need to be set aside once the bond is finalized. And just some other routine things coming down the pipeline for lease standards and some changes that are coming with the accounting that will work with the administration and implementing in the future.
So everything we've done, to me, it looks like our utility rates, we're pretty much locked into where they are, should maintain. I mean, we didn't lose any money. So I'm saying what we did and what's going on, our present income should take care of that.
Right, if you look on when we were talking about that operating line, which is one thing that we look in audits, because those funds are supposed to be based on user fees.
Yep.
They're supposed to be funded, and including depreciation. And many governments and cities struggle with setting appropriate rates to cover depreciation. Part of the things when you're dealing with, whether it's, rural development or USDA, some of those are requiring too that you set rates appropriate, so that you're covering that, and you were, with the one exclusion of the electric fund, just due to like what Brian said,
Yeah.
which really isn't the typical case. So your rates are set accordingly to cover those operating costs, including depreciation and debt service. Right. Any others? 2021 was a very, very big year as far as the not only what you see out in the community for the infrastructure projects, but the financing of it. And the multiple sources were quite challenging to do it. The engineers were great to work with in keeping track of that information, and so we were able to work with them, and then we'll work with them again once the project is finalized to get the assets accordingly into the water and sewer, because obviously depreciation comes on that afterwards. The other thing, actually, I should make a point, is in the management letter too, one of the things that is occurring is the street lighting portion. And I know the city of Buhl has typically put the street lighting in the electric fund. Generally, it's recommended that it's part of the general fund costs of it. So when you look at that's part of when you look at that line too. That includes the street lighting, which in most cases would be covered from the general fund. And that's just noted in the management. Any other questions or concerns on the
Kind of a lot of
financial?
information.
It is, when you comment about, 3.5 or 4 hours, there's months of work that go into this, and I have to commend your staff of two, of Ryan and Diana, to really put up with the auditors on site and all the questions, and keeping the records neat and orderly, responding to questions very timely. So overall, that process of the audit went well. It was just a large financial project with multiple sources, and federal, state, local, some grants, some loans. But it all is coming together.
I got one question for you. Is that ambulance one, is that gonna go away?
It should, well, that's one, it was sitting in there, it would be the council action to do that. I know, there was the approval to take $200,000 out of that for the public safety, or for the fire pumper, but that would be a motion that the council could make to permanently close that.
Yeah, I don't know what's
Yeah, we didn't want to Diana and I had that conversation, but then we had Essentia come in, so we just wanted to hold off until we had things finalized and everything was stable.
I think if I remember right, the dialogue was when the ambulance was first sold and the process and the funds that were there, the discussion at that time was to leave the fund intact for a little bit until things worked it out to see if that was the course that was gonna happen. But it is open for the council to make that decision on what they want to do with the remaining funds.
And we were putting into that fund too, right, with, one mental, one here?
Correct.
No, it was going into the
Or
fire.
it was going to the fire.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's right now, there's a few just a few $100s that's showing up in that fund, and really what that is every once in a while you'll get a collection from before. It's just pretty minor, so it's down below in other operating because you're not operating the ambulance. Any other questions or?
I have one question, and it has nothing to do with the audit.
Okay.
But you heard earlier, though, we accepted a donation for the rec department, so that has to go into the rec department. Do we have to put that in a certain fund under the rec department to pull it out, or how does that work? Does it go into like the general part of the rec? I just want to make sure that we're doing it right, because they're doing it perfectly. They're coming in, they're asking permission, they're gonna get the donation, and and they gave us the reason why. I agree with that 100%, that's great. So
Minnesota statutes require that any time that there is a donation that comes into the city, that that council does accept that in the form of a resolution and acknowledging what it's for. And then once that's done, then what the administration or your finance staff will do is they'll put it into a donations account that's flagged or designated specifically, what's actually restricted if it comes from the outside. And they'll track that accordingly. And then when the items are spent, it'll go under the revenue or the expenditure budget for the rec department accordingly. But if they've gone over the budget, so one of the things might be maybe this was an additional amount over the budget onto it, it's just explain that they went over the budget because they had donations that would cover it. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding or if that answered your question or.
So let's say the rec gets $300 and they spend $350. Is it up to the administration then to find that 50 somewhere else? Can they go to another line item in that budget, or?
Within the budget of the rec department?
Yes.
So that would be a decision that's really decided by the council on how much you have. You have some cities that will set a budget by department.
Okay.
And they say, here's your department budget. They allow the department to spend within that. They might move a line or two without having to come with a formal budget approval.
They can do that though.
Okay,
yeah.
The administration could do that as long as it's within the same department and it's a line item within the same department. If they start materially trying to pull from another,
Yeah, you can.
then that would require council action to do.
Under our budget for rec, we have a capital reserve in there. Does that have to come before the council if we want to dip into the capital reserve to pay for something like this for one over, something that's legal, but it has to be done via council action?
Right, because if you're talking about the committed funds that are part of the fund balance portion that had been set aside for the rec department,
Okay.
that's part of the committed there. When it's been committed or set aside in order to spend anything out of that, needs to come and have the council approval to spend it or uncommitted, right?
Okay, let's want to make sure that if we have to make a transfer, that we follow the right. I don't want to get cited.
Yep.
Okay,
No.
that's perfect.
Any other questions or?
You're getting off easy.
Well, there's a lot there, if there's anything else. Otherwise, the report will be due to the submission to the state auditor by June 30th, so assuming that the council approves that tonight.
I want to thank you. I've watched you in here sweating it out and working side by side, so we appreciate that. So thank you very much. So with that, is there a motion to approve the audit for 2021?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Stuart. Is there support?
Support.
Support by John. Any further comments or questions? Last chance to ask anything of Bonnie.
Thank you.
If not, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Once again, thank you very much. CIP update. John's not here. Ryan, do you have something you want to share with us?
Engineer Jambe formulate, he had something come up late, but basically they're finishing up the paving this week. They're doing the alleys of Woodbridge and Whiteside right now actually, and they started yesterday, should finish that up by tomorrow. And then I believe they're moving on to the streets of Woodbridge and Whiteside plus Mercer. And then we'll be working on general restoration across the entire town. So we've had some calls from residents on this side of town or by City Hall that, their alley still needs some work. They will be back in there. The engineers have developed punch list items to, get it to grade, seed, sod, whatever they need to do to make sure it's back to how it was, so.
And if they have issues, they go through the city. All they have to do is call, and then you'll relay that to John and Casper. Okay,
Yep.
that makes sense to me.
Right, how are we looking for that completion date? Are we still on par for that?
I believe so.
What was the date we were given?
July 1st,
July 1st, okay.
substantial completion. Obviously, it depends on if we get another 3 inches of rain, that's kind of pushed some things back where they've had to go back and fill some areas in. But yeah, as far as I know, July 1st should be substantial completion.
Okay.
It's been in good weather for a couple more days.
So, and after substantial, there may be some of those little restoration areas that they need to come back and do, but substantial completion, all the paving's done, all the major things are done. It's just basically dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
If there's touch-up, we still have other projects in town
Yeah.
later this
Yeah.
summer, so, okay.
I think we're right on par for the paving. This is when they were scheduled to be here this week. So.
Yeah, I know we had some concerns from the residents over with the alleys and stuff with the latest rain, but it seems like we got all those issues worked out and those alleys should be just about completed and the lips removed and filled in, so I think we're in pretty good shape over there.
Okay, let's move on to, under number 7C, Essential Ambulance Services Agreement. Ryan, you want to just lead us into that and then we'll vote on that?
Yeah, so this is the ambulance service agreement between the city and Essentia. Just as a reminder for everyone, the city controls the license and we're entering into an agreement with Essentia to operate that license based on state statute. It's all laid out in state statute, how they need to staff it, how they need to operate and things like that. Both Attorney Carney and myself have gone through this along with Essentia's legal counsel and their representatives. Again, they'll be looking to upgrade our license to an advanced life support model, which again is a higher level of coverage than what they're currently operating at. So it's basically, it is what it says. Essentia will be managing our ambulance license on behalf of the city. And from talking to Essentia, from talking to the BUHLJUNE PD, everything seems to be going well. They haven't required mutual aid from any others. They've helped neighboring communities. They're starting to. I was talking to their director today, and they just hired 3 more people for BUHL. I think 3 local people too. So I think things are coming together pretty well for everything, and it's like I said, for the city essentially, we're not subsidizing Essentia, and they're going to provide an advanced life support model for the residents of town. It's really a win-win for us.
Attorney Carney.
Yeah, it's just follow what Ryan said. I believe it's in City of BUHL's best interest. As we know, they kind of got out of it, had Meds one from Grand Rapids. That didn't really pan out, and we went out to quotes who would be interested. All we got was Essentia, and this is the agreement to effectuate ambulance coverage for the residents of BUHL, and I believe it's in the best interest. And Ryan and I have looked at it and went back and forth with counsel for Essentia, and it's a fair agreement, and my recommendation is the council approve it tonight.
do you consider this boilerplate language mostly, or is there some unique things for Buell in here based on our situation?
Well, I think it's the upgrade, like Ryan said, that, we're getting a better level of service for the citizens.
So we have to have it that we expelled out, yes.
Yeah, and they're able to do it, so.
Yeah, I mean, basically, a lot of the information is dictated by state statute and their requirements, so it is. But like Attorney Carney said, the benefit for Buell will be that upgrade to that ALS service.
That's big, okay. Is there a motion to approve the Essentia Ambulance Services Agreement? I'll make the motion, is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Stewart. Comments, questions now for anyone?
I think Essentia is gonna open the door for us a little bit if we do go with a new utility, or new building, fire hall, ambulance, whatever. I think Essentia is gonna be I think we can benefit by using them.
They'd be a key player,
Yeah,
where someone else wouldn't be.
right. So, if we are looking for money to do that building and whatever,
It's only gonna expand their service.
yeah.
So it's like I say, as Ryan said, it's a win-win, a big win for the city of Buell and the residents, so. Further comment, question?
I have a question. Under Article 3, Section 3.1, city agrees to pay Essential EMS the amount of $1.
We had to have, I think it was recommended by both legal counsels that we had to have some type of value to it, so
Okay.
that's where that dollar.
They call it consideration for a contract offer and acceptance, and it has to have consideration to be a valid contract,
It's
so.
like a placeholder.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, all those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. We'll now move on to 7D, Billy's request. Ryan, you just want to highlight that real fast?
Yep, Carla down at Billy's wrote a letter requesting to block off that portion of State Street right in front of her for a car show on the 23rd. I did ask her, it's kind of just a couple hours during the afternoon, so.
What day of the week is that, right?
I believe it's a Saturday,
Okay.
yeah.
She didn't say which hours though, did she?
I did read, she didn't in her letter, but I did talk to her, and it's like 4 to 6 is what she was looking
Oh,
at.
okay.
And the 23rd is a Saturday.
So that wouldn't interfere with any of what's going on down there?
It's from Jones Street to Culver.
Just basically from Jones, just past her bar area, so.
It depends on how many cars come, we can move the barricades.
Yeah. And the police will be aware of that and just
Yep.
do the regular.
Yeah,
They don't
that's
have
on
to provide-
July 23rd, not June 23rd, July 23rd.
Yeah. Okay.
I so move that we allow.
Okay, motion by John. Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Brandon. Pretty straightforward. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. 7E, election judge appointments. Ryan, just want to run through this real quick?
Yeah, the city advertised for election judges. A lot of these individuals have done it before and have done a great job for us, and those names that are on your memo are the ones we're recommending to hire at this time.
I'll make a motion to hire the election judges.
Motion by Stewart. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Carol. Do you have to forward these names on to the county or anything like that?
The county does have record of these names. We have
Okay.
to train them and give them appropriate training.
We train them.
We train
They
them
don't have
as
to go to the phone.
Diane and I, as the city's head election officials, we do
Do you do it individually or as a group?
We do it as a group.
Okay.
Otherwise, we do, the county does have a training platform if someone couldn't make it on the day we have a.
That's
Have our
great.
training.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That motion is carried. Now we'll go on to 7F, Resolution 22-26, AB Ballot Board. Discussion. Ryan?
So this is a statutory requirement that cities establish an absentee ballot board to review the absentee ballots that we received. selected election judges will be appointing by us. They need to conform with party balance and things like that to review and accept or reject absentee ballots that the city received. This is actually pretty new. This is a new statute in Minnesota law where the actual election judges, along with election officials, Diana and I will have to work together and meet basically every 5 days up until 14 days prior to the election. Then it's every 3 days to review and accept or reject absentee ballots. So statutory requirement establishing the absentee ballot board.
Is there a motion to approve resolution 22-26?
So moved.
So moved by Carol. Is there support?
Support.
Support by John. Further comment or question? Hearing none, Ryan, please take the roll.
Counselor Pastori.
Yes.
Counselor Marcus.
Yes.
Counselor Carter.
Yes.
Counselor Lehman.
Yes.
Mayor Claridge.
Yes. Resolution passes. Okay. 7G, Councilors' comments. John?
I don't have much.
Okay. Carol?
No.
Brandon?
I have a question. Ryan, could you explain how the process of how one becomes an election judge? I mean, you inquire with the city, correct?
Yeah, I know. We've posted in newsletters and down at the post office. Basically, we have a form that you need to fill out. We do ask a party affiliation, which that's kept internal between the head election officials for the city, because we do have statutory requirements to keep party balance as election judges during certain things. But I think we would still accept more judges. If people are interested, they can give us a call or stop up at City Hall and we can get them a form that we need.
Well, I'm just curious, if you have 100 people apply for this, how do you narrow it down?
And in the past, usually, unfortunately, we don't get to that point. Usually everybody that signs up, we like to give them the opportunity to be a judge, whether it's just at the primary election or just at the general, because it is a good experience. And, actually a lot of those that have done it for the first time really had a good time doing it. So we do try to give everybody an opportunity if possible. Obviously, we have to take into consideration that we do have to pay our election judges, so there's a budgeted amount that we set, but we do allow a little bit extra to do that. Obviously, there's some things that disqualify you as being an election judge, such as a relative or something running for office and things like that you have to take into account.
Or if you hold
an office, yep.
Is a background check required by the county?
A background check is not
No,
required.
okay.
The general requirement is that you're a registered voter in the state of Minnesota.
Well, you have to go to that training.
Plus, be trained, which is
take a day or two off, and they show you the ropes.
Yeah, they have to be trained, which the training is provided by the city essentially or the county.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Anything else, Brandon? No. You're still up. Okay, Stuart, what do you got?
We got a Rams meeting on Thursday of this week. It's going to be at the new Iron Trail Convention Center. Get a tour of that. The old president moved out and vacated her seat in Aurora, so we got a new president, Pat Maduri. Probably many.
He's back.
And we're gonna have appearance from Laura Kishner from Enbridge at the meeting, so she'll talk about Enbridge.
Where's Pat taking over?
Rams.
He was
president
He was president
for years.
a couple of years ago, but you can only hold 2 consecutive terms or whatever. And so then they
You have
appointed
to step out.
this lady from Aurora,
Cindy, yeah, right.
and now she moved out of town.
No.
So then we voted Pat back in as president. And he's a good president.
Nice to be involved.
I probably asked you before, are those open to the public to attend?
You can.
Yes, absolutely. Anything like that.
we don't ever hardly get much.
No, unless there's an interest that something's being voted on or approved that affects a city, certain city or a township.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything
That's
else? Okay. Just one little thing for everybody. The next council meeting will be Tuesday, July 12th, and we only have one in July, just as a reminder. So Attorney Carney, we'll see you on the 12th. Just, I don't want you to let that slip now.
Well,
Making a note there.
That's true. Mayor's comments. For this week's Mayor's comments, I just wanted to give the public an update as construction will be wrapping up throughout most of the town in the next few weeks. Yesterday, and once again, this is a little bit outdated, crews began prepping for the final layer of blacktopping in the alleys and streets of Woodbridge and Whiteside along with Mercer Avenue. Additionally, many areas throughout the town will need some final restoration work. This includes alleys and boulevards throughout the entire project area. A punch list of all these items has been developed by our engineers and will be coordinated with Casper Construction. Please let City Hall know if there are any concerns that you have about your property or your neighboring property. The wet spring caused many areas to sink, and we want to make sure that none of these issues are overlooked. If you have any questions, please give Diana or Ryan a call at City Hall and they will communicate your concerns to our engineers and construction company. Lastly, I wanted to update the public that the improvements to the senior center are just about complete and events will resume at the center in the near future. This project, which includes new flooring, painting, countertops, windows, and ADA upgrades, was fully funded through federal funds. The senior center and its members are an asset to the city of Buhl and surrounding areas by hosting countless events throughout the year. Its members also donate thousands of volunteer hours to everything from funerals, fundraisers, weddings, and everything in between. Myself as mayor and most of the council are extremely grateful for all your efforts, and I'm happy we're able to approve such a worthwhile project. Without further ado, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make it.
Motion by Stuart, is there support?
Support.
Support by Brandon. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned at 7:26.